Hi, this is Hank reporting from Kyiv, and this is my update on Russian-Ukrainian war. Let's see what happened around Ukraine in the last 24 hours. First ever attack on Chechnya. UNESCO heritage attacked in Kharkiv. Russian drone attacks stats. Baykar builds a factory in Ukraine. Russian reaction to new military plans. $3 billion aid to Ukraine from Japan. Sandarmokh tragedy anniversary. Russian losses summary, and more. For the first time in history, Ukrainian drones attacked Chechen territory, the building of the Special Forces University in the city of Gudermes. In fact, this is something new because I've not heard that there were any important military facilities in Chechnya, and the only threat to us is Kadyrov's infantry. Also, it's also a rather controversial statement. If you follow the events, then you understand what I mean. They are more likely to pursue personal gain than to actually help Russia achieve anything on the battlefield. For Ukraine, they are beneficial in that they are much more actively exchanged after we take Kadyrov's men as captives. Here on the map I have marked the approximate distance from the territory controlled by Ukraine to Chechnya. In a straight line, this is about 540 miles or 870 kilometers. It seems to me that this is more a psychological factor, a demonstration that in Russian there are no untouchables, and if you started a war, then expect that the war will come to your home in one form or another. You saw the result of the attack in the photo. The university building is burning, and according to Kadyrov, no one was hurt. This is how I imagine him now preparing for a revenge. He already said that they won't take Ukrainian soldiers into captivity. Oh, well, nothing new. Unlike our attacks on military and strategically important objects, the Russians as usual attack what will cause a greater public outcry. Last night, a winged arrow bomb hit the Derzhprom building, a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and also residential buildings in Kharkiv. 4 people were killed. This building is one of the symbols of Kharkiv. The city's residents love it very much. I was inside only a few times as a child, but I passed by many times. This is a photo of my friend Igor with a tattoo of this building on his arm, so it's symbolic. In the background, you can see how Igor is assembling FPV drones to avenge this attack. This is how we live today. This is Derzhprom before the attack. I learned from the internet that it turned out to be the first Soviet 13-story skyscraper, and its construction began in 1925, almost 100 years ago. Derzhprom is on the list of the state monuments of Ukraine of national importance and on the list of UNESCO sites that require special protection. During World War II, the Nazis occupied Kharkiv and mined Derzhprom and were going to blow it up during the retreat, but it didn't happen. Russian missiles have hit its territory twice already, but then the windows were damaged and now a bomb has hit the building itself. I hope that the building will survive the second war. This is the aftermath of the night attack here in Kyiv. 6 people were injured, thank God no one was killed. A multi-story building, an administrative building, a gas pipeline, a store, and the nearby cars were damaged. You may notice that these are again civilian buildings, nothing even remotely related to military equipment or objects. This news is getting shorter and shorter because there is simply no point in constantly repeating how the Russian army attacks civilians who do not even pose a tactical threat. At the same time, they realized that the world community was already okay with this and began to publish videos of them attacking residential buildings in Kherson with FPV drones. Let me remind you that this was the only regional center that they occupied in 2022. It was very funny how their propagandists immediately began to say that the entire south of Ukraine and the city of Kherson is Russia, while they pronounced incorrectly and called it Kherson, as no one ever says in Kherson itself. Then we carried out a successful counteroffensive and drove them out. Now they are simply terrorizing the civilian population with such a safari. Radio communications specialist Serhiy Flash, from whom I often learn interesting news from the communications and electronic warfare industry, published the following statistics on attacks by Russian drones. The last 3 figures on the right indicate August, September and October of this year. As you can see, the number of their attacks is growing progressively, and this is due to the increased production of the same Shaheds that we talked about earlier, plus the use of new types of cheaper and simpler drones like Gerbera and Parody, which are designed to distract our air defense system. Serhiy also says that the fact that Iran began to supply semi-assembled Shaheds, which the Russians finished at their factories, played a role. In this way, they managed to make productions cheaper and faster, not very good news for us. A much better news for us is that the Turkish company Baykar is building a factory for the production of Bayraktar attack drones in the Kyiv region and plans to make it the largest manufacturer of its drones in Europe. I believe this is due to some favorable conditions for them, and it's more profitable for the Turks to have production in Ukraine than in Turkey itself. Interesting. This could be a good example for other countries. It is said that they plan to produce 120 drones a year, and the cost of the factory is about $100 million. Let me remind you that these drones use Ukrainian engines. It turns out that Ukraine produces very high-quality engines that are widely used in aviation. For example, in Russian K-52 combat helicopters, and even the only Russian aircraft carrier could not get out of repairs because it has Ukrainian engine installed. And you understand, we will no longer sell the new ones to them. I wonder if Putin will have courage to attack Erdogan's sons-in-law plant in Ukraine. Armin Pepperger, the director of the main German arms manufacturer Rheinmetall, recently announced that Germany is building 4 military factories in Ukraine. I talked about this. Now it's interesting to discuss the Russian reaction to this. Of course, the propagandists start to shouting that these factories should be destroyed immediately, and the biggest destroyer of the universe, Dmitry Medvedev, said that there would be some kind of Russian holiday firework. I thought how humiliating it would be to descend from the level of a president to a cringe-worthy man who simply comments on some news with curses. And here's the highlight of the situation. Look, the Germans announced that they were building 4 factories, and the Russians reacted. That is, it was not the Russians who learned from their intelligence that the Germans were building factories, but I'm sure that they were being built under conditions of some kind of secrecy. The conclusion is simple: the Russians would not have known if the Germans themselves had not said so. I have a question. How many more things happen that are simply not announced in the press? And as a result, neither we, the civilians in Ukraine, nor the occupiers know about them because they were not simply announced. If the Russians were so powerful, then what would have stopped them from attacking these 4 factories and then saying, "We found out, we destroyed them"? No one would have any questions. This is a military success. But to find out about what someone said and threatened, this is empty talk. Japan announced the allocation of $3 billion aid from frozen Russian assets to cover part of the loan for Ukraine. This is part of those $50 billion that the G7 countries are giving us. I really want to see more of this. Please don't give us weapons for free. Sell them to us. Make money on them and deduct the cost from frozen Russian assets. This will be fair and beneficial to all of us. The longer Putin wages war, the more he will pay with his own money. If only we could get to his personal secret assets in Cyprus, registered to the fictitious company Ermira Consultants, and the Panamanian assets of his daughters under the cover of Topsail Development and Dorrington Commercial, that would be wonderful. I'll leave you a link under the video. These days, 78 years ago, a terrible tragedy occurred, which is known in the world as Sandarmokh, and in Ukraine it is called the tragedy of the executed Renaissance. From October 27 to November 4, the Soviet government, using the NKVD, shot 1,111 people, including 287 Ukrainians, in the forests of Karelia. In the 1920s, Ukrainian culture developed so well and posed a threat to the Soviet government. You can now draw a parallel with how Putin's Russia tortures us and destroys everything Ukrainian. When they occupied Mariupol, they burned books and immediately ran to repaint the road signs in Russian. When I was studying the history of Ukraine, especially the 1920s and 1930s, I thought it was all an exaggeration. How could people who were so convinced that equality and brotherhood were the foundation kill other people for their language, culture, of origin? I was a bit skeptical about it, and honestly I assumed that some things were exaggerated or that we were not told the whole story. Now I personally know people who lost their teeth and health because they spoke Ukrainian in Ukraine. They were tortured by Russians in a prison. 2 years ago, an exhibition called Sandarmokh, where the trees have faces, was opened in Prague. I will leave links to materials in English dedicated to the Sandarmokh tragedy. This is a horrible story that needs to be heard. On Sunday, another large demonstration of families of prisoners of war took place despite the threats of terrorist attacks. These people come out and demand the release of our defenders from Russian captivity as they were promised by politicians with the support of the UN and the International Red Cross in 2022. Our captives have been in terrible conditions for the 3rd year and we want to free them. In this photo, I highlighted the word will. which in Ukrainian means both freedom and strength of character. More of that, the four letters together form a traditional Ukrainian trident. In the foreground, I put two girls who put flags on their shoulders. On the left is traditional blue and yellow flag of Ukraine, and on the right is the black and red flag of Ukrainian nationalists. We say that when blood gets on our flag, it darkens and becomes black and red. In our culture, red traditionally means love, and black is associated with grief. In this photo, I balanced them with symmetry and put the word freedom in the center. It turned out very symbolic. This is our defender who was wounded and now walks on titanium legs. On the left prosthesis, you can see a funny capybara, and it definitely adds unusualness to this shot. I admire the fact that many of the military play up their injuries and do not lose spirit, and we all support them because these people are heroes. This is a portrait of my friend Olga. She has amazing blue eyes. As they say, the eyes are the mirror of the soul, and together with the three A's of sign, they go very well. Last night, the Russians launched 48 drones at us. We managed to shoot down and land 46 of them, but as you can see, Kharkiv and Kyiv were damaged, and a ballistic missile hit a house in the city of Kryvyi Rih. In response, we attacked their two distilleries. So to say, hit them where it hurts the most. I don't even want to make a separate blog about this news anymore. Two factories are simply burning at night, the Russians are running and trying to put the fire out to save vodka and fuel. Nothing to see here, please disperse. Russian casualties in the war. As you can see, the number of tanks and infantry fighting vehicles has decreased, but the number of soldiers lost is still above 1,300 per day. We have not yet received confirmation of the presence of Koreans on the front lines, so these figures are purely the Russians and those mercenaries who were there before the North Korea entered the war. Judging by the statistics, we will see 700,000 next month. I remember people saying at the beginning of the invasion that when the Russians lost 50,000, they will stop, because these are terrible losses. In Afghanistan, the Soviets officially lost about 65,000 people killed and wounded, and this greatly influenced the collapse of the Soviet Union. And in the two Chechen wars, Russia lost about 20,000 people. Just compare them to the stats in Ukraine. I wonder what the final number of this war will be. This is a bonus news for those who watched the video to the end. As you know, Google and YouTube blocked and deleted the channels of Russian propagandists. For this, a Russian court ordered Google to pay a fine in the amount of, verbatim quote from Russian news, 2 undecillion rubles. This is a number with 36 zeros. Until the fine is paid, it will double every week. This will certainly scare Google. This is what the number looks like. I wonder until what point they will continue this farce. And I'm sure you, have never heard of an undecillion in my life. How much is that in dollars at the current exchange rate? Something like 20 bucks. Well, that's all the news for today. Thanks to everyone who watched these videos. There are already over 700 of you. Amazing. If you want to support this channel, all the links to PayPal, Buy Me a Coffee, Patreon and crypto will be below the video. Take care, and I hope to see you tomorrow.